A solid understanding of Excel is expected in most roles these days, especially in high-paying jobs like accounting, data science, and business analysis, to name a few. When sourcing candidates, companies don't just ask random Excel questions. They typically use skills tests to quickly identify whether you're up to the job. Now, there are various types of skills tests, but in this video, I've compiled a list of questions covering the most common intermediate level tasks, along with a few bonus questions to challenge and enhance your abilities. I'll step through answering them, and if you need a more in-depth explanation, there are links to more detailed videos in the practice file that you can download from the link in the video description. So be sure to download it and follow along. And at the end of the video, share in the comments how many questions you were able to solve. I'm excited to see how you did. Okay, let's get started. We'll start with a formula test that evaluates your understanding of the order Excel evaluates operations. The first question is, insert a formula to calculate the profit percent. We calculate that by taking the selling price minus the cost price divided by the cost price. Now, Excel will evaluate division before subtraction, so we need to start by wrapping the selling price minus the cost price in parentheses divided by the cost price. Press enter and we get 40%. Let's double click to copy it down. Now, it's easy when you know how, but a lot of users get caught out by this. So I've included a tip in this file to help you remember the order of evaluation. Next, we'll look at functions and the different ways we can count data. We'll start with an easy one and build from there. Question 2.1 is, how many employees do we have age data for? Well, we're counting numbers, so we can use the count function, and we simply select the age column, press enter, and we get 6. Question 2.2, how many employees are listed in the table? Well, we need to count the employee names, so for that we need to use the count A or count R function. Counting the employee names, press enter, and we get 10. Question 2.3, how many email addresses are missing? Well, we can see there's some blanks in the email address column, so we can use the count blank function to count the empty cells or blank cells in this column. And there are 4. And question 2.4 is, how many employees are aged over 30? This requires a conditional function like COUNTIF or COUNTIFs. There's only one condition here, so COUNTIF will do. The range are my ages, and then the criteria is where they're greater than, and you need to use the ampersand to join it to 30. Close parentheses on COUNTIF, and there are 3 employees over the age of 30. Okay, stepping up the difficulty a little, let's look at some logic function questions. Question 3.1, write a formula to determine if the monthly sales for each employee have reached a sales target of 5,000 or more. If they have, return the text met, otherwise return not met. We need to use an if function here, starting with the logical test, which is where the sales value is greater than or equal to 5,000. Now, I've typed the target of 5,000 in a cell here so that it's easy to change and it will feed through to all the formulas. I'll F4 to lock the reference to that cell. If that's true, we're going to return the text met, otherwise we'll return the text not met. Close parentheses on if, and then double click to copy it down. The next question is, write a formula that checks if the monthly sales are greater than 8,000 and the performance score is 4 or higher. If both conditions are true, calculate a bonus of 5% of sales, otherwise return 0. Again, we're using if, but this time we need to also use the AND function because we have 2 logical tests and both must be true. The first one is where the sales are greater than 8,000, and again I've put it in a cell so we can easily update it. F4 to lock the reference to that. The next logical test is where the performance score is greater than or equal to 4, and that's also in a cell here. F4 to lock that reference. Close AND. So if both of those conditions are true, we're going to pay them a bonus, which is 5% of their sales. Otherwise, they get 0. Close parentheses on if, double click to copy it down, and we can see 2 people get a bonus. So far, so good. Let's move on to the next question. Here we're going to tackle some lookup questions, and they're a staple in almost every job. Question 4.1 is, in column F, look up the department ID in column K and return the manager name. Okay, there are a few functions we can choose from here, including VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, or index and match. I'll use VLOOKUP because all versions of Excel have that. So we're looking at the department ID in this column here, and we're returning the manager. Let's F4 to lock the reference to that table, comma. The manager is in the second column, and we want an exact match, which is false or 0. Close parentheses on VLOOKUP, press enter, let's copy it down, and there are our managers for each department. Next question, 4.2. In column G, look up the department ID in column K and return the department name. Bonus points, return the results as a spilled array. Okay, to use spilled array formulas, you need Excel 2021 or later, or 365. I've got 365, so I'm going to use the XLOOKUP function. I'm looking up the department IDs in this column here, and the return array are the department names. Close parentheses on XLOOKUP, and because it's dynamic array formula, it spills the results. If you don't have XLOOKUP, I've inserted an index match alternative in the file that you can download from the link in the video description. As you probably noticed, knowing your way around Excel functions is crucial, and that's exactly why I created a course focused on mastering advanced Excel formulas. Each topic is covered in short, easy to follow videos, and you'll get practice questions to solidify your skills, plus support and mentoring from me personally. And if you're ready to level up your Excel game even more, I've got other courses that might be just what you need. You can find all the links in the description and pinned comment. Needing to manipulate text is another super common task, and there are a few ways we can tackle it. For this section, we're going to stick with formulas. Question 5.1, in column G, write a formula to combine the product name and price formatted with the $, comma separators in 2 decimal places. For example, laptop-1200. Okay, we're using a formula, so we're going to concatenate the product name with the ampersand, and then we want space hyphen space, and then we're joining it to the price. I need to format the price with the $, the comma separators in 2 decimal places, so I'm going to use the text function to get the price and then format it. So the format is $, hash, comma, separator, 0.00, close double quotes on the format, close text, press enter, and there's my product name and price. Copy it down, job done. If you're not familiar with custom number formats, there's a link to a free guide in the video description. Okay, let's look at the next question. Question 5.2 is in column H, write a formula to split the specifications out into their separate components as delimited by the semicolon. I have 365, so I'm going to use the text split function. The text I'm splitting is here. The column delimiter is the semicolon, so we put that in double quotes. I don't have any row delimiters, I don't need to use any of the other arguments, so I'm going to close text split, and it spills the results. Let's copy it down, and that job is done. If you don't have the text split function, another way we can split this text is using the text to column tools. So with the data selected on the data tab of the ribbon, over in the data tools we've got text to columns. This opens the text to columns wizard, and we can choose to split it by a delimiter or fixed width. Remember, I've got the semicolon delimiter, so we'll leave it at delimited and click next. Here we get a preview of how it's going to look, and you can see semicolon is automatically selected. If you have different delimiters, then you choose one accordingly or put in a custom one. So I'm happy with that. Let's click next. Here we get to specify the data format. By default, it's general, and you can see each column is general. That's fine for this data. And lastly, where do we want to put it? Well, I'm going to select this cell over here so that it doesn't overwrite my existing data, and click finish. Now I have a copy of the data split into separate columns. If I select any of the cells, you can see they're not linked to the original data. So if there are any changes to this data here, you'd have to run through the text to column tool again. Pivot tables are an essential skill, enabling you to quickly summarize a lot of data in seconds. So let's test those skills next. And if you aren't familiar with pivot tables, there's a link in the video description to a tutorial to get you up and running. Question 6.1 is insert a pivot table in cell G8 that summarizes the sales in the table below by category down the rows. Bonus points. Reference the data in a way that allows new data and updates to automatically be included upon refresh. There are a couple of ways to reference the data so that it can be automatically updated, but the easiest is to format the data in an Excel table using the keyboard shortcut Ctrl+T. It's detected my data table and that I have headers, which I do, so I'll click OK. And if we look at the Table Design tab, you can see it's been given the name Table 4. If we click on Resize Table, you can see the range that it's referencing. If I scroll to the bottom, that's the bottom of the table. Now if I add any new data to row 84, this range will automatically expand to include it, so I don't need to mess about adjusting the table reference. Okay, from here I'm going to summarize with a pivot table, and it's detected the table name. We're going to put it on this worksheet in cell G8. Click OK. The pivot table field list, I want the category in the rows and the sales in the values. Okay, that's question 6.1 done. Question 6.2. Add a column to the pivot table that calculates the percentage each category's sales are of the total. To do that, I need to add sales to the values area again, and then right click, show values as, percentage of grand total. Right, let's give this a new name, percentage of total. And that's question 6.2 done. Question 6.3, filter the pivot table for the year 2022 using a slicer. There are a few ways we can insert slicers, but with the field list open, it's easy to right-click on the year field and then add a slicer. Let's bring it over here into this space and I'll just resize it. And then select 2022, and that's question 6.3 done. All right, let's move on to the next challenge. The next question looks at common data cleaning tasks and assesses if the candidate is familiar with a useful shortcut for filling empty cells. Here we need to fill the empty email address cells with a formula that creates the email addresses from the first name dot last name at example.com. And for bonus points, select all the empty cells before typing in the formula and then enter the formula in all selected cells in one go. I'll start by selecting all the email address cells, and then with Ctrl+G we can open the Go To dialog box. We want to go into Special, and then we want blank cells. Click OK. You can see all my empty cells are now selected. Now I can insert my formula. I'm just going to concatenate the first name and last name, but I'll wrap it in the lower function to remove any capitals from the names. So the first part of the email address is the first name, and then we're going to concatenate a dot, and then we can concatenate the last name, and then we're going to add at example.com. Close the double quotes, close parentheses on lower, and to enter them in all selected cells, press Ctrl, Enter. And there we go, we now have all the email addresses populated. In this last set of questions, we need to draw on multiple skills, including tables, conditional formatting, filters, and finding duplicates. Let's take a look. Question 8.1 is identify the duplicate rows in the dataset below. And then question 8.2 is filter the dataset below to only show the duplicate rows. Well, I'll start by pressing Ctrl+T to format my data in a table. Click OK. This will just make it easier to work with and automatically add the filter buttons, which I'll need for the next question. Now, in order to identify which rows are duplicates, I need to add a new column that concatenates all the text on the rows into one cell. We'll call it concatenated data. Now, those with Excel 2019 or later or 365 can use the text join function. If you don't have the text join function, you can use the concat function instead. Now, the first argument is the delimiter. I could skip it here, but let's add a comma just for clarity. Next, it asks if I want to ignore empty cells. I don't have any empty cells, but let's go with true anyway. And lastly, the text. Well, here I want the product ID through to the stock column. Close parentheses on text join, press enter. Now I can add conditional formatting to this column to highlight duplicate values. On the Home tab, Conditional Formatting, highlight cells rules, and at the bottom, duplicate values. I can choose a format. Red is fine, let's go with that. And that's question 8.1 done. Question 8.2 is filter the dataset to only show duplicate rows. Clicking on the filter drop down, I'm going to filter by color,
and filter by cell color. And there are my duplicate rows.
If you want to impress an interviewer, keep learning, because Excel continuously adapts to meet the demands of the market. And while it's unlikely you'll be tested on newly released features, your knowledge of them can give you an edge over other candidates. For instance, watch this video next to learn about a new function that's already making waves in the Excel community. It's an exciting addition that could help you stand out in your next interview. I'll see you there.